We're joined now by our good friend and someone who's already been on the show before, Parker Thune, who covers the Oklahoma Sooners. Good morning, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Blake. How about yourself?
I can't complain. Massive weekend in the SEC, massive weekend for Oklahoma and Texas. And I want to talk to you about this game because it's going to be a big one. The first time the Red River rivalry is in the SEC. And I just want to get your overall thoughts. I know I'm going to leave this question very generic and open, but when you look at this game and going into it, now that it's in the SEC and the implications, how do you view this one going into this year?
Somebody tweeted it the other day, Blake, and it's 100% true. Look, the move to the SEC means a ton for Oklahoma and Texas. For instance, being at Auburn a couple weeks back, you can just tell showing up to that place, seeing the way that they tailgate, seeing the way that they roll 88,000 deep on a Saturday. It does just mean more in the SEC. But this game, this particular game, man, this game could be a MAC game, and it would not affect the significance of it at all, straight up. Because, I mean, look, if you're not an OU fan or a Texas fan, you don't go to this game. Like, this game is for OU people. It's for Texas people. These two fan bases hate each other. You know, every single second Saturday in October at the Cotton Bowl, it's going to be 100,000 plus people in that stadium. It's going to be half burnt orange. It's going to be half crimson. And that game's going to mean everything to those folks. Now, in years past, at times it has had implications nationally with regard to the BCS race, the college football playoff race, what have you. Other years it hasn't meant as much. But for these two fan bases, it frankly does not matter what conference affiliation they have, what patch they're wearing, none of that. All that matters is that you beat the team across the sideline.
And that's very interesting because, look, Parker, as somebody whose team that he covers outside of just talking the SEC, LSU won the national championship in 2007. And this year has felt very chaotic, like Vandy beating Alabama last week. And so everybody's like, oh, man, Oklahoma, who knows? I'm like, man, chaos can happen and strike anywhere, no matter what. So this is going to be probably a really good game and a rivalry. But I got to ask you, obviously against Tennessee, there was a quarterback change from Arnold to Hawkins. I guess my question would be to you, did you like the change? And what have you seen from the change that might give Oklahoma a little bit more better chance to win in this one?
Yeah, well, look, the change was necessary. The way that Jackson Arnold had played through 4 games, and particularly how he was playing against Tennessee, it was, in a word, erratic. And you can't have that in the SEC. Man, if you're going to contend in this conference, you need to have strong and stable play at the quarterback position. You don't need to always have an elite guy. You don't need to have 2019 Joe Burrow, but you do need to have a guy who's going to keep the ball out of harm's way and keep that offense humming. And that just wasn't happening with Jackson Arnold. And look, it was very clear that everything that he was dealing with was mental. I feel as though that's a guy where, look, if the season plays out the way that we expect it to the rest of the way, he's probably in the portal at year's end. He will probably be somewhere else in 2025. And I think he will bounce back and have success. But his issue, at least this year at Oklahoma, was between the ears. And fortunately, the Sooners happen to have a guy waiting in the wings, in that QB2 role, that is very mentally resolute and stable and exactly what this team needs right now in order to give them a shot against Texas. And moreover, he's going to be smart with the football. I think what's also the case, and has been the case for a while, is that Hawkins' skill set is far more conducive to what Oklahoma offensive coordinator Seth Littrell would ideally like to do. For instance, against Auburn, you didn't see any of the RPO. They don't want to do the RPO. They don't want to make that a crucial concept of their offensive identity. You look at Littrell's background, he comes from the air raid discipline, right? And so everything that Hawkins does and everything that he has grown up doing, everything that he's been trained to do, I think is far more of a hand and glove fit for what Oklahoma wants their offensive identity to be, as opposed to the RPO. That's something that was had significantly ebbed in popularity among the fan base. And again, just not really something that I think all other factors being equal that Littrell and Oklahoma wanted to have to do. They would do it for Arnold, right? Because you came in with the understanding, okay, you kind of had to give him the first crack to be your starter, former 5-star guy. He's your QB of the future. You play to his strengths. And they tried, and it didn't work out. And now it's Hawkins' time, man. And ultimately, I think his style of football is what gives Oklahoma a chance. And shoot, in this game, Blake, and I've been saying it all week, I'll say it every single week till I am dead in the grave about this game. Both teams always have a chance. It does not matter how much of a discrepancy there seems to be on paper. There's just something about this game, something about this matchup that levels the playing field. Outside of that 2022 debacle where OU had a very obvious extenuating circumstance, right? You don't have anybody on the roster beyond Dylan Gabriel that can throw the football. Outside of that one game, every single year for a decade, it's been a one-possession game. And there have been times you've had a very strong Oklahoma team matched up with a really weak Texas team, a really strong Texas team matched up with a peripherally weak Oklahoma team. And Oklahoma's got a decent team this year. There's potential there. Texas, obviously, very strong, the number one team in the nation for a reason. But the fact that this game has a 15-point line in favor of Texas. You're looking at Texas minus 15 right now. I can't fathom that, man. I cannot fathom how one team, regardless of the circumstances, could be favored by that much in this particular contest.
Parker, if you're Venables, if you're that staff, do you tell Hawkins 2 reads and then you're out of there? Like if you got 1 read, 2 reads, and then look, you got to pick up first downs. Like you got to pick up yardage. I know that sounds very simple and very just like, hey man, you might not need to do that. But look, like I saw guys like Caleb Williams do that in key games 2 years ago. I saw Jaden Daniels do it. And quite honestly, I've seen Jalen Milroe do it all year. And I'm not saying that he's on that level of quarterback, but there comes a part where, like, look, man, you're too athletic not to go get us 7 yards on first down. Do you think when you talk about his style of play, do you think that the staff has very much tried to beat that into him this week? Like, look, man, 2 reads, you got to get his positive yards.
I think with the state of this offensive line, because Oklahoma, and they've been dealing with injuries in front. Everybody knows about the injuries at the wide receiver position for Oklahoma, but they've been dealing with a revolving door up front as far as their personnel. With the state of this offensive line, I do think that kind of has to be, maybe not an every snap type of thing, but in general, you're trusting the kid to make quick decisions. And that's something he does. It's something he's always done. He's decisive. If he sees 5 yards, be it with his legs or through the air, he's going to take what the defense gives him. And so if the defense is giving him 5 yards with his legs, man, he might not even get to read number 2. If the 5 yards are there, he's going to go get it. And so that's got to be the game plan for Oklahoma in this football game, because you do come in as the heavy underdog. You do come in, again, on paper, outman. That isn't always indicative of what the outcome will be in this game, but you are going to have to play really sharp, really smart, really precise football for 60 minutes to give yourself a chance against Texas. And so you're not going to be able to rely on the big chunk plays and 3rd and long conversions. Like, for instance, Caleb Williams hitting Marvin Mims for a 60-yard touchdown on 3rd and 19 in 2021. Like, that's just not happening this year for Oklahoma. You're going to have to be methodical with it. Going to have to take what that Texas defense gives you and be content with eating the elephant one bite at a time, if you will.
I was going to ask you, what do you think the biggest concern that Texas presents going into this game is? And you mentioned the offensive line. I would assume that is that your biggest concern in this game, is the O-line play?
I would say so. And it's less of a concern with Hawkins than it would have been with Arnold, because there is obviously a much greater degree of elusiveness and ability to create outside the pocket. So Hawkins isn't a guy that necessarily needs a clean pocket to flourish. But what's going to be crucial for Oklahoma is that they can establish the run game, and that can't happen without strong play up front. Because if Texas can succeed in making this Oklahoma offense one-dimensional, the same goes for Oklahoma, right? If they manage to curtail the impact of Texas's run game, that's where they put themselves in a very strong situation to be able to go and win the football game. But you can't be one-dimensional offensively in this football game. You look at the last 25, 30 Red River Showdowns. I think the team that has outrushed the other has won all but like 3 of those games. So there's a very direct correlation in this football game between running the ball more effectively than the opposition and winning. So from that standpoint, Oklahoma's run game has struggled all year. In the conventional sense, Hawkins has had some success. Everybody saw the long touchdown run against Auburn that he popped off, but they got to get the running backs going, and that can't happen without strong play up front and a little bit more creativity in their run schemes as well.
You talk about the running game, and this is the question that I'd have. I don't think that anybody is mentioning what Oklahoma can do to Texas to win this game as much as they're saying, well, Texas is going to do this, 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 and this. I look at Texas's run game, Parker, in the sense of that I know that they had some injuries at running back coming into the season. I know that Quinn Ewers getting hurt. I know they like to utilize him some in that, not much, but some. Is that the biggest thing that Oklahoma can defend against is stopping them in the running game? Because, look, I go back and watch that Texas and Michigan game. I know that was a blowout, but Michigan can't – I mean, they can't throw the ball to save their life. But one thing that they did was no running back had over 4 yards to carry. Maybe it might be the running game, but what is the biggest thing that you think Oklahoma is going to be able to take advantage of against Texas?
Yeah, well, this is a very opportunistic Oklahoma defense. They've been very, very good at creating turnovers thus far in 2024. And you look at Quinn Ewers and his history in this football game specifically, he had 3 turnovers against Oklahoma a year ago. And
right.
So what you're going to want to do defensively if you're Oklahoma is make Quinn Ewers beat you with his arm, because I think you trust at a certain point, okay, he's going to blink, he's going to make a mistake. We're going to capitalize on it. Now, obviously, you then have to turn around and do something with the ball offensively to be able to fully capitalize on an opportunity like that. But for the Sooners, I think the recipe is very simple defensively. You have to take away the run, which I think they're capable of. If you look at the Tennessee game, for instance, Tennessee averaged less than 3 yards per carry.
Right.
In that game against Oklahoma. Look at the Auburn game. Jarquez Hunter popped a couple chunk runs. Auburn averaged 3.3 yards per carry by the end of that football game. So Oklahoma has been strong against the run. They have shown the ability to take that facet of the offense away from the opposition. If they can pull that off against Texas and make Quinn Ewers make plays through the air, that is the path to victory for Oklahoma, because you have a guy in Michael Hawkins that does not have a propensity to turn the ball over. It's never been a tendency of his at the high school level, nor so far at the collegiate level.
Mm-hmm.
You have a guy in Quinn Ewers on the other side that is gettable, right? It might be 1 turnover. It might be 4 turnovers. Who knows? But I think there is some confidence defensively for Oklahoma that, okay, if we make Quinn Ewers throw the ball 30, 35 times in this football game, we're going to get him once or twice. And that sets us up well to be able to hang with Texas in this game.
You know, man, I've said this about Quinn a lot, either on our national show or here. He's going to make a mistake, Parker. Like that, like it's going to happen. I mean, I don't think he's a bad quarterback at all. And I know that Texas fans hate me for like every time they're in our comment section, like blasting me on it, and that's fine. But he's made mistakes. Like I think it was I forget the game earlier in the year. He just makes a boneheaded decision throwing the football. And I'm like, look, man, this isn't the defense that you can do that against.
No.
So we'll see. Parker Thune is our guest. I want to go around the SEC with you very quickly before we get you out of here. Yep. Obviously, Vandy does the absolute unthinkable. They do the full college football 25. If you start a dynasty with Vandy and they upset Alabama, now that Oklahoma's in this conference, and even if they weren't, but when you look around the conference and you've seen teams this year in the conference, how have you looked at them? How do you think it's been shaking out so far? Who's impressed you and maybe not so much?
Man, I'm really finding the parity pretty striking this year in the SEC. And I think that's scored by Vanderbilt's win over Alabama, certainly, but then a team like Kentucky going on the road and beating Ole Miss, right? You're seeing all of these dominoes fall early in the season, which suggests, man, it's going to be a really wild back half of the SEC slate. And this is, I think, where Oklahoma fans, people here in the Sooner State, are simultaneously optimistic and also very skeptical at the same time, because you look at their schedule the rest of the way, and all of those games are winnable, right? All of those games are winnable. The one that kind of felt invincible before last week was Alabama. And then they go get beat by Vanderbilt. And you think, okay, so maybe they aren't as invincible as we once imagined. But
right,
all those games are winnable. They are also highly losable. And so, man, I know Oklahoma fans liked their former status in the Big 12, where you just run roughshod on that league, go 11-1, 12-0 in the regular season, and you coast in the Big 12 championship game. And that was kind of the run of the mill every single year. But I do think it's that much more exciting to play in a conference like the SEC, where, man, even when you got a team like Auburn that's coming off back-to-back losses to Cal and Arkansas, you walk into their place, and they're going to give you a hell of a fight for 60 minutes, like they did to OU at Jordan-Hare a couple of weeks back. So,
right.
And this feels like a wide open league, much more of a wide open league than I would have anticipated heading into the year. And I still think Alabama and Georgia are a cut above the rest. We'll see with Texas. I kind of think, Texas hadn't really been tested yet. Could they very well be on the same level as Alabama and Georgia? Absolutely. But the next 2 weeks are going to tell us a lot about Texas, because they've had an Oklahoma problem for years and years and years. They struggled to win this football game in the 21st century. So they are the number one team in the nation, but this game's going to be very telling. Then they got to turn around and play Georgia. So if Texas is for real in the year of our Lord 2024, I think we'll know in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And at that point, you have some semblance of an upper echelon, but yet it doesn't feel untouchable the way that it has in the past in the SEC.
If another number one team in the country goes down, 2007 is going to knock on the door and go full Sam Ehlinger and say, we're back. I fully think that that's going to happen. But I agree with you on the parity. And look, Texas, you're right. The next 2 weeks for them is very crazy. I mean, you got Oklahoma, your biggest rival, and then Georgia coming into town. It's going to be very, very interesting. I got to get your thoughts. I lied. One last question before I get you out of here.
Sure.
Lincoln Riley is 5-7 in his last 12 games. And look, I know that you cover Oklahoma and I get all of that, but I just got to add, let me just say this, Parker. I never thought in going into year 3, the last 12 games that he would have, that he'd be 5-7. I thought maybe 7-5, maybe, I thought that maybe it would be reversed. Are you surprised at all that that has been what's been happening to him in USC over the last 12 games?
I'll be honest with you, Blake. I'm not surprised that he has run into some speed bumps.
Mm-hmm.
That 5-7 mark. That is kind of surprising, because you would figure that a guy like that, with as much of a resume as he has at a place like USC, and especially with the first season he had there, man, they'd at least have it rolling to some degree. Maybe they're not a playoff contender, but they're at least winning with some regularity. And they did have a nice victory to start the year against LSU. They did.
Right.
Taking that away from them. But, man, here's what I think. First off, you have to consider that when Lincoln Riley took the job at USC, transitioning to the Big Ten was nowhere on his radar. I doubt it was on USC's radar at that point. If it was, you're talking very preliminary stages.
Right.
And Lincoln Riley's style of football is not terribly suited for the Big Ten. It really isn't. He is the black sheep in that conference right now. And moreover, what you're seeing in 2024 is what a Lincoln Riley football team without an absolute superhero at quarterback looks like, because that is the reason Riley's teams have subsisted over the years. I know this better than anybody, having covered Oklahoma, right? You look at that 2021 team, for instance, his very last team, where they're no-call PI in Stillwater away from going to the college football playoff for the 5 years. 2018 is another great example. You take Caleb Williams off that 2021 roster, you take Kyler Murray off that 2018 roster, Blake, those teams are struggling to make a bowl game. For so long, Riley's teams and their deficiencies, the deficiencies of those teams have been masked by truly elite quarterback play. And Miller Moss is a solid quarterback, but he is not elite. He is not Caleb Williams. He is not Baker Mayfield or Kyler Murray or Jalen Hurts. So what is the identity of a Riley football team that does not have absolute top-tier quarterback play? I'm telling you, no one knows. And we're all going to find out together. We already have begun to find out. We're all going to find out together what that looks like the remainder of the 2024 season. And I think that's going to dictate a lot of the perception going forward as to what Riley is truly capable of at USC, and will probably open the book back up to the discussion of what was it, Lincoln Riley, or did he just luck into an insane run of quarterbacks that kept those teams afloat?
Parker, it's interesting you put it like that, because my co-host Joe on our other show, he's like, Miller Moss is the worst quarterback that Lincoln Riley has had in the last 8 years. And dude, USC fans came out of the woodwork. Where they came from, I have no idea. And they were like, no, he's not. I mean, he's like Jalen Hurts, Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray. And then all of a sudden the comment stopped, you know, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, look, do I think Miller Moss has done some really good things? Yes, but he's not that, you know, and he hasn't shown to be that. And I agree with you. I'm just so shocked, to be honest. Like, I thought that they would be 7-5, 8-4, right? Like, I thought that that would be maybe where he is going into a Big Ten, but man, 5-7 last 12 games. That's so crazy, man.
Well, and you know, I've said it for years. I will continue to say it. I believe it to be 100% true. The 2018 team, I think, is the greatest example of the Lincoln Riley phenomenon, because if anyone other than Kyler Murray, literally anyone other than Kyler Murray, is the starting quarterback for that football team, I don't know if they are better than 6-6, 7-5. You look back at that year, he single-handedly spared Oklahoma from what would have been numerous embarrassing losses. That team gave up 40 points at home to Kansas. And you remember what Kansas was at the time, Blake.
This ain't Lance Leipold, Kansas, that you were talking about either.
I firmly believe that is the worst team that ever made the college football playoff in the 4-team era. 100% believe.
Yeah, and look, man, which is so crazy because everybody looks at that game against Bama. I mean, I know Lincoln exposed them a little bit, or Kyler exposed them in the second half, right? And then Clemson just replicates exactly what they did and win. But the bottom line is, you're right. Like, if he does not have stellar quarterback play, I mean, like, look, man, I'll be honest with you. We broke, obviously, the LSU USC game down on our post-game show. And I'm like, guys, they had 7 insane catches. 3 of them were one-handed. Like, they had to have exceptional plays to beat you. So it's just insane, man. Parker Thune, look, I know that people know where they can find you, but just in case that they can't, tell everybody what you're doing. I know that you're in recruiting. I know that you're on radio, but tell everybody where they can catch all your stuff, man.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a Sooner fan and you aren't tapped in with KREF, the home of Sooner fans, definitely do so. You can listen live throughout the state of Oklahoma on several of our radio affiliates, or just download the KREF app. You can listen crystal clear from anywhere in the world. I am on 12 to 3 Central Time every single day. And I'm also the co-publisher of OUinsider.com, where we're feeding you the scoop, the intel, up-to-date information on OU athletics, from football to recruiting to basketball, softball, anything and everything. We got you covered over at OUinsider.com with our fantastic staff. And if you don't follow me on Twitter, please do so. There's only one of me, at Parker Thune.
Yeah, I know. The team was like, hey, Blake, because most people on social media, they have like their names are different because somebody already has it. And it's like Parker Thune, I mean, so look, man, I greatly appreciate you joining us. Good luck to all y'all this weekend. I'm sure y'all going to have fun, but thank you for being here with us.
Hey, anytime, man. You take it easy. Have a